Hey everyone, welcome back to Gorge Views, and this is episode 2 of Hawking Niagara. In this episode, we're going to feature the Sharp-Shinned Hawk, and we're going to look at ebird a little bit more and help familiarize you with how to navigate it and what its utility is. Not just to like an individual birding or anything, but to us as a community, and kind of link it more to this ecotourism idea that I'm trying to promote. And it's not going to be me talking this time. I'm going to introduce you to someone who's been doing regenerative agriculture for a long time now. And he's been touring the world, sharing his experience with regenerative agriculture with others. And lots of scientific research has been done on his ranch. He's from North Dakota. Later on, I will introduce some of these cutting-edge scientists on soil health. But I don't want to belabor that now. I want to get to the Sharp-Shinned Hawk. So I'm starting in all about birds again. And this time I'm on the life history tab. Just I said I would go over navigating ebird and its utility, but I'm going to always do both until we've really conquered both of these two sites. But over on the Life History tab, you get more details. What is its habitat? Where does it live? What does it eat? And speaking of what it eats, the Sharp-Shinned Hawk is one of the hawks you're very likely to find in your backyard. Because if you're putting bird feeders out and attracting songbirds to your backyard, that becomes like a really easy hunting ground for the Sharp-Shinned. Now, there's all sorts of ethical questions. When I talk about we have to have conversations, as a community, particularly if we go down the ecotourism path. Ethics is one of the things that we're going to have to discuss. Personally, this is an area of ethics that I think are best left to the individual. Some people have a problem with just putting bird feeders out at all because you're conditioning an animal, a wild animal, to find an easy food source, and you might be deconditioning their instinct to go forage. All the research and stuff that I've seen demonstrates that while birds are easy to condition that way, because they're easy to condition, if you take the bird feeders away, they'll go find food quickly elsewhere in their habitat. Now, you might be artificially inflating the available food in a habitat, and therefore if you were to stop doing the feeding, you move away and take your feeders with you. Yeah, not now, that's a question now. Maybe you've overpopulated. I think, me personally, I put out some bird seed. I usually put on the ground. I only put, every few days I put some seed out, and it's about 1 day's worth. So I'm definitely not one to habituate. I can see myself putting feeders out in the future, but what I'd rather do is just put habitat on my land, that provides natural food from natural plants, and do that. And so, but that's me, right? Not everyone, and we mentioned that in the previous episode. Not everyone has the same property and the same opportunities, but they want to see birds. Some people live in an apartment, they can't do that, so they but they have a balcony, so they put a bird feeder on the balcony to attract birds to their balcony. I think that's totally acceptable. Now jumping back to the Sharp-Shinned. So, what I see from the experts and reading about the Sharp-Shinned is, if it does get attracted to the food source that you've created by feeding birds in your backyard, and it's eating little songbirds, and you find it disturbing, you just remove the feeders for a couple of weeks. The Sharp-Shinned will move on to a new hunting territory, and then you can put the bird feeders back up. Maybe he comes back, maybe he doesn't. And that's going to be a number of variables. If he doesn't live that close to you, if he isn't nesting that close to you, then probably not. If he is nesting very close to you and he always has to fly by there, he's going to notice the songbirds again, and he's going to be back again. Now, if I were using bird feeders and I got a sharp-shinned, I would let nature run its course, right? I think the sharp-shinned's entitled to eat also. The only hawk I've seen on my property was a red-tail. He was going after a squirrel. Who am I to protect squirrels from red-tails? The red-tail's entitled to eat, Now, in that case, he missed the squirrel, so I didn't have to watch the kill strike or anything. But, to me, that's nature. That's nature. It can be ugly too. It can be beautiful. It can be ugly. And that's just part of it. And I personally feel ethically that, if you don't want to observe it, look away. That's. But I don't understand criticizing others or judging others for what they do. So that's just me. But you see, as a community, we have to have these discussions. Now, let's talk more about the sharp-shinned. Let's look at it through the ebird lens now. So over here in ebird, you'll see that this bird's been observed 881,000 times, according to ebird. If you remember the rough-legged hawk, it was about around 300,000 observations. Now, the rough-legged hawk had about 25,000 photos, and the sharp-shinned only has 27,000 photos, almost 28. And as you can also see from the range map, this is an American bird. You don't see it on the other continents. And even down in South America, it'll migrate and spend the winter down there. In our area, it's a year-round bird. The observations, I always want to pull these finer points out of the data and highlight that with people. Why is it that there's so fewer photos despite so many more observations? Well, it's just behavior, quite frankly. It's chasing songbirds. It's moving fast. It's very agile. It's a smaller bird too. And it also likes to live in the deep forest. So you have less opportunity. Again, when you're in the woods, it is much, much harder to take a bird photo in the woods because you have foliage blocking the observation. You don't have the distances, and it's much, much harder. So you're not going to get as many photos. Another reason why I think our bird wealth, that variable of sight line, makes our bird wealth more valuable to birders on the planet, because it is easier to observe every species in our area. Lucky I got one flying overhead, typical bird of prey shot, but it's not how I normally see the sharp-shinned. Now, one other great series I got sharp-shinned over the gorge, flying fast, and I'm guessing this was a female, because that's another little sharp-shinned fact is, in this species, the female is about a third larger than the male. So again, along the gorge, you got sight lines. You're going to see your birds. You're going to get photos. So a little photo tip. So birds in focus, I'm painting with the bird, which causes motion blur of my background. This sucker was moving fast. It was flapping hard. Sharp-shinned doesn't soar as much or glide as much as the others do. All right, so now we're in ebird. We looked at all that. Now I want to look at it from the Niagara County perspective. So there, we'll just use my bird list and find the sharp-shinned. Here it is. All right, so now we're looking at 426 observations, 17 photos. I mean, it's almost following the exact same pattern as the rough-legged hawk global observations to sharp-shinned global observations. We've seen it almost 4 times as often here in Niagara County, relatively the same amount of photos. I think we had 20 photos of the rough-legged hawk, if memory serves, with only 17 of the sharp-shinned. Now, just a reminder, or if you haven't seen the other video, what I'd like everyone to do when they're in ebird is look at the photos and I don't want to look at my media, I want to look at all media. Sorry folks. look at the photos, and I've already rated this one. I was in earlier and I did some ratings. But give these other photographers some credit so that our local birds end up being promoted at the state level, right? Because the bird photographs that have gotten the highest ratings and the most ratings, the algorithm's going to choose. And when someone's looking at New York State, they're going to see photos of our birds, and they're going to see that that photo was taken here in Niagara Falls. That's one way we promote ourselves through the ebird platform. Now, look at the bar chart. We don't see this as often in the summer. But why is that? It's not here? No, it's a year-round bird for us. But again, it likes the deep woods. It likes to be in trees. It hunts in the forest as often as it does in open grassland. And with all the foliage, humans just aren't going to observe it as often in the summertime. But as the foliage starts to drop, and as the northern ones in Canada that went up there to breed pass through our area on the shoulder seasons, spring and fall, our population kind of increases twice. But we got ones that are here year round. One other thing I want to kind of show you guys in ebird is exploring things by county. Alright, so when you explore by county, you'll see what's been happening with birders in the last few days. All the common criminals, common characters. Purple sandpiper, that's unusual. And they got a photo, something else you can see in this key. Person commented on the bird, probably, and they gave us a photo. So a very recent photo. And if I had been over there, I would have gotten a lifer. I've never seen this bird personally in my lifetime. I've already rated the photo though earlier today because I kind of did this exercise just to see if anything was cool to show you guys. Have you guys ever seen this bird? Three Sisters Island, folks, right here, a mile from where I'm sitting, right in Niagara Falls. Bird wealth. We have it. We've got to start sharing it. We've got to start promoting it. And we've got to get our youth involved. That's pro-social behavior. In an early episode, I talked about ebirding as something akin to Pokemon. I keep showing it to you on a desktop computer, but you can use your phone. You can download an app for free, the ebird app, onto your phone. And you can just walk along and click off the birds that you're seeing, take photos of them immediately and put that photo into your checklist. And it's going to use a geolocation on your phone to say exactly where you were. So much easier. So just like Pokemon, you go around and capture the prizes. Now you can do it with birds, real life. And so it's going to be a totally different prize every single day. And as you get youth doing this, they got something to do. You can't be vandalizing houses while you're birding, right? And as you get into birding, you're not going to like litter. It's going to annoy you. So you're not going to litter. You might even start picking it up, which just improves our environment and removes some of these things that irk us in our community at the moment. There's a very famous birder out of London. He's called the urban birder. This guy, he can go anywhere in the world he wants now, and he has traveled the world looking at other bird species, but he still loves birding in urban environments. He really promotes birding in urban environments. And quite frankly, I can see why. Particularly, this guy's in London. That's a really big city and highly urban. I've mentioned it before, Niagara Falls is more suburban. But you should check out the urban birder. If you don't believe me that you can bird in urban environments and get very large lifeless, I think he exemplifies my point too, that we don't know what birds we have because we don't have that many people looking. This guy found all sorts of birds in London that people just didn't think were there, over the course of his lifetime. And it really awakened people in London's, opened the eyes of Londoners, particularly, London birders who are always traveling out of the city to go see birds. Like, wow, there's a lot more I can actually see without having to travel. In future videos, I'm going to be highlighting different scientists. Now, Gabe Brown, who I'm about to introduce, He's not a scientist. He's a farmer who started down the regenerative agricultural path. In the 90s. I think 93 is when he started farming. A little bit of backstory on Gabe, because it's not in the video I'm about to share with you. But he married into farming. He didn't grow up farming. He married into farming, so he did start farming a family farm, but it wasn't his. He didn't grow up there. And, when he took the farm over from his father-in-law, unfortunately, they had like 4 years in a row of major hail damage. And his father farmed it for decades and never even had a hail problem. He ended up, his first 4 years, ruining his crops, making it very difficult to meet ends, pay mortgages and things like that. And so he really had to figure out how to overcome the challenge nature brought him. And I've seen him in plenty of other talks, because this guy's a prolific talker now. Goes all over the world and shares his story and shares his experience and shares what he's learned promoting the regenerative agriculture. But what Gabe, he now considers that a blessing. Now, obviously, at the time, he didn't consider it a blessing. Without further ado, let's just hear Gabe's experience.
Healthy native rangeland has hundreds of different species of plants and animals and insects. Monocultures have but very few. This lack of biodiversity has led to the destruction of our soil resource, and that's what I'm going to visit with you about today. I'll share some proof with you, and this is statistics provided by North Dakota State University. In Walsh County, North Dakota, back in 1960, the topsoil was 34 inches deep. In 2014, that topsoil was only 15 inches deep. A stunning 56% loss. The organic matter level on that same soil had gone from over 8% to less than 3% today. Look at the ramifications of that. The soil on your left was a soil that had not been tilled and had not seen monoculture production practices. That's the same soil 17 years later on the right, after 17 years of the production model of tillage and monocultures. It also destroys the pore spaces in the soil. Those pore spaces are critical for the life in the soil, are critical for water infiltration. Because if we don't have soil aggregates, we cannot infiltrate water. I took this photo in a field less than 10 miles from where you're seated today. That shows a half of an inch of rainfall can no longer be infiltrated into the soil profile. If we can't infiltrate water, then what happens? We resort to things such as tile drainage, and you're seeing this all over the central United States today. What happens when we put tile drainage in and we do not have the soil aggregates to hold our soils in place? That soil ends up in the watershed. And unfortunately, along with it goes all the nutrients that may have been applied to those fields. That lack of biodiversity also leads to lower nutrient cycling. If we don't have adequate nutrient cycling, we're going to have to add more and more synthetic fertilizers. Those synthetic fertilizers come at a cost of fossil fuel usage, and they also spur the decline of the soil biology. We need to understand how soil functions. How soil functions is due to that biology, because the plants get their nutrients via the biology. High synthetic fertilizer use also aids in the propagation of weeds. Most weeds love nitrogen. The more synthetic fertilizer we apply, the more weeds we get. If we have increased weed pressure, what do we have to do? Spray herbicides. Now, unfortunately, many of those herbicides are chelates. What is a chelate? A chelate binds metals. So any of the metals such as magnesium, manganese, iron, zinc, copper, then become unavailable to the plants. If the plant cannot uptake these micronutrients, it's more prone to disease. Because plants cannot ward off diseases on their own, we need to spray fungicides. Fungicides, then, are detrimental to what? Soil biology. Because plants are not healthy enough to ward off pests, we then need to do what? We spray pesticides on the crops which are meant for human consumption. Because we spray pesticides, we have a decline in what? The very predator insects which would take care of the pest which we are spraying. We also have a decline in pollinators. You can hardly pick up a paper or a magazine today without reading about the plight of our pollinators. These pollinators are critical in our crop production. The current production model is all about killing, whether it be weeds, a fungus, a pest, our diversity, or our profit. Take a look at these projections just put out by North Dakota State University. There are 2016 projections for some of the major crops in our state. Every one of them projects a negative return. What impact does that have on the quality of life of those producing that crop? But take it a step further. What impact does it have on our schools? Drive around this state of ours and you're going to see a lot of small towns that have fewer and fewer children attending the schools. What effect does that have on our businesses and then on our communities? What effect does the current production model have on our health? Take a look at this. The nutrient densities of the foods that we produce have declined anywhere from 15 to 65% in the last 50 years. This has had many negative consequences. The United States spends more on health care than any other developed country in the world. Yet look at this. We lead the world in the incidences of ADD, ADHD, cancer, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, autoimmune diseases, and the list goes on and on. This is not acceptable. It cannot continue. But the good news is there's another way, and I'm going to share that with you. It's nature's way. Look at how nature functions. In nature, there's no mechanical tillage. Yet in our production model, we're tilling the soil. In nature, there's always armor on the soil surface, protecting that soil from wind erosion, water erosion, evaporation. Yet in our production model, the fields lie bare. Nature cycles water very efficiently. It's able to infiltrate into the soil profile, then due to the large amount of organic matter, it's held there for such a time it's needed by plants. By destroying our soil resource, we can no longer infiltrate the water and store it for when it's needed. Nature has living plant root networks. There's things growing all times throughout the growing season. Not that way with production agriculture. So often we hear about the production model that we have today as the conventional model. I would argue that nature's way is the conventional model because it's been around for eons of time. Think of it this way. What did this land look like 400 years ago? You had a lot of diversity. There was diversity of plant species, forbs, grasses, legumes, trees, and then also you had a diversity of animals and insects. And all these worked together to build a healthy ecosystem. So there's 5 principles that we must follow in order to follow nature's model. They are, number 1, least amount of mechanical disturbance possible. On my own ranch, we have been 100% zero-till since 1994. We have not tilled the soil at all. The second tenet of soil health is armor on the soil surface. We always have the soil covered. That's a picture of one of our fields following seeding. That field is no longer prone to wind erosion or water erosion because we're keeping armor on the surface. Third tenet of soil health is diversity. My son teaches rangeland management at the local community college. He brought his students out to one of our paddocks. They counted over 140 different species of grasses, forbs, and legumes. Why don't we have that in production agriculture today? On our operation, we're trying to mimic it. These are just some of the cash crops that we grow on our operation. We don't just grow one cash crop, we grow many. Along with that, we do not grow cash crops as monocultures. In the upper left there, that's oats with 3 types of clover grown in it. In the upper right is a very diverse cool season broadleaf mix. The lower left, that's corn with hairy vetch grown in it. The lower right, that's sunflowers with over 19 species of covers grown with it. Tremendous amount of diversity feeding soil biology. We also have orchards on our operation. These orchards, besides providing us with the fruit, we're able to have livestock grazing underneath them, thus stacking enterprises. We have 5 acres of vegetable production, but it's not as monocultures. In between each of those corn rows is rows of peas, beans, squash, zucchini, carrots, pumpkins, and a variety of other species, so that we get the benefit of diversity. 4th tenet of soil health is living root in the ground as long as possible. You don't have to drive very far around this state to see that there are monocultures growing for only a short period of time, and then the land lays idle. These are just some of the cover crop species which we planted on our operation this past year. We actually planted over 70 different species. From the time the snow melts in the spring until the snow stays in early winter, we have a variety of species growing on our land to feed soil health. We're optimizing solar energy collection because how the system works is we take sunlight through photosynthesis. It makes carbon. That carbon is transferred down to the roots where it's leaked out as root exudates. That's what all the biology feeds on. We need that biology in order to get the nutrients to the plant to nourish animals and people. For you see, if we have healthy soil, we're going to have clean air, clean water, healthy plants, healthy animals, and healthy people. We have to focus on feeding biology. Along with this, then, we're able to feed all of the wildlife that's on our operation. We also feed a myriad of different insects. Insects tend to get a bad rap. We like a wide variety of insects, including all the predator insects which take care of the pests. We want to address our problems through biological means, not through chemical means. Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, one of the world's foremost entomologists, told me this: for every insect species that's a pest, there's 1,700 that are beneficial. Why in production agriculture do we aim at just killing that pest when we should aim at providing habitat for all those beneficials? The reason producers have a pest problem is because of a lack of diversity. We need to think biologically. 5th tenet of a healthy ecosystem is animal impact. On our operation, we run a herd of 350 beef cows. We also grass finish that beef because we know it's healthier, both for us and for the animals. We have a flock of sheep and raise grass finish lamb. We have pastured pork. We have broilers, which are out on pasture. And we have a flock of 750 laying hens, which are also out on pasture. We also have bees. Those bees, besides pollinating our crop, provide us with honey. Here's what we've done on our operation. When we started in 1993 on the left, we had very shallow topsoils, 1.7% organic matter. We could only infiltrate 1/2 of an inch of rainfall per hour. We then went no-till. We started to diversify the cash crop rotation. We noticed an improvement in soil health. From there, we started to add cover crops. Another improvement in soil health. Our organic matter levels rose. Our infiltration improved. We then started integrating all of these livestock species on top of it. Another marked increase in the health of our soil ecosystem. Now in 2013, we actually have a plot of land which is now over 11% organic matter. The same soils that in 1993 could only infiltrate a half of an inch of rainfall per hour can now infiltrate over 15 inches of rainfall per hour. We've done this without the use of any synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, or fungicides. We've done it by following the principles of nature. This has led to a ranch that is profitable every year, regardless of price. And we do this without taking part in any government subsidies of any kind, whether it be a crop insurance, EQIP, CSP, or any other form of government payment. Thus, we are not a burden to society. The stacking of enterprises has allowed us to produce many more nutrient-dense calories of food at a lower cost as compared to the current production model. Yes, we can feed the world, and we can do it in a way that regenerates our resources, thus healing farms, families, and communities.
All right, so everyone, that was a quick introduction to Gabe Brown sharing his story. I chose that clip because it's one of the more short, succinct clips, and I anticipate what I'm pumping out right now is going to a broad audience with varied interests. If you found Gabe's story compelling and you want to know more about his regenerative agricultural practices and what he's been doing, I'm sharing my screen right now, and you can see there's plenty more out there just on Gabe Brown. Now, I don't know how many hours I've watched of Gabe Brown, and I've watched as much, if not more, of a lot of scientists, some of whom have visited Gabe's ranch and have done research on his ranch. Gabe is now a consultant. This guy travels the planet now, sharing his practices, helping other farmers regenerate their own soils and become profitable at the same time. Now this is ranching, right? And my show is about Niagara Falls, and it's for Niagara Falls, which is not we don't have farms in Niagara Falls, do we? But we do have farms in Niagara County. And we are a consumer market. Not only are we a consumer market, but annually we host a exceedingly large consumer market. We have to learn to teach. So the rest of the world needs to learn these things. Niagara Falls is a great place to learn those. 90-some countries in my building alone at Gorgeview annually. The city probably hosts well over 100 every single year. And these efforts are occurring across the planet. If you look at, Gabe started in '93. If we look at that particular video, I don't have that one on the screen right now for you guys to see, but that TED Talk was recorded in 2016. It's had 150,000 views. That sounds like a lot, but you've got to understand that's a minuscule proportion of humanity has been exposed to Gabe. But look at some of these other videos down here. 2020, 2 years ago, only 3.9K views, 30K views for a 2020 video. These are all more recent ones, only 93 views, but that's probably a newer video. This guy's an award winner, right? He's been recognized by all sorts of institutions. He's integrated into a lot of things. There's big companies working with Gabe to understand his practices and to proliferate that. General Mills, for example. It's big stuff with big ramifications. There's big science behind all of this, and that's what I'm trying to point out to everyone is, this science has been just kind of continuing in the background of human species or of human activity for the last few decades as we focus on, what the latest microchip is. It's amazing science. And I've talked about the carbon sequestration and the climate change and the tension, that things like the Paris Accord brings to the table. And it just causes friction. And I'm definitely not saying ignore the emissions side of the equation. But did you hear what Gabe's doing, right? Gabe's not using tillage. And he's not spreading poisons. So he's not burning fossil fuels, and he's not requiring the market to burn fossil fuels to produce those things to give them to him. And as a result, he's providing a higher quality product, a healthier product to anyone who's buying from him and his ranch. That's amazing. But if you looked at that chart, and I actually went and edited that video, so his chart of, it's his story of starting in 93 till I think 2013 is when he finally got to the full broad spectrum that he's at now of the integration of the farm animals and all the enterprise and stuff too. Maybe it was earlier in this video, and I've definitely mentioned other videos, it doesn't take eons to develop an inch of topsoil. Right? He showed you how he depleted in his area in North Dakota, 50% of the topsoil depth in 50 years. Or more than that. I have to go back and review the video to see specifically. But what you also see is how quickly he regenerated topsoil on his own land by changing practices. Right? And in that, when you talk about the percent of organic matter, it sounds small. He went from less than 3 up to now he's at 11%. But he also pointed out how it used to have over 18%. So he'll probably get to 18% as he continues engaging in those practices, because it's increasing every single year. It's a process. It's a cycle. But then you got to understand what that represents. That organic matter, it represents carbon sequestration. Right? It's a small percent, but then you have to apply that to all the inches of topsoil times the number of acres that he's farming. And in some other videos, he showed math on that. You're talking like 189 tons of CO2 per acre is what he's sequestered to date. Now, if you really get into this deep, you learn that if we stop contributing, if we stop adding CO2 completely to the atmosphere, which is impossible, we can't completely stop that. Even if humans went extinct tomorrow, CO2 would continue to go into the atmosphere because you have other activities that are natural that produce CO2. All the other animal species on the planet practically are exhaling CO2. Volcanoes, some volcanic explosions are decades worth of human emissions. So it still goes in the air, so it's impossible. But let's just say somehow we do. At the moment, the excess CO2 in the atmosphere is still going to remain. It has to be removed before you reverse the current trajectory. And that's like 40 gigatons of CO2 has to be removed out to get us back to the baseline that climatologists believe we need to be in. Again, it's arguable whether these numbers are completely accurate now. What's not arguable is that CO2, and probably because of agricultural practices more than anything else humans are doing, is affecting climate in a way that is debilitating to us. It is going to present very costly challenges in the future. Plants take CO2 out of the air. It is in the industrialization of agriculture across the planet that is preventing the natural carbon cycle from occurring. So while we're putting more CO2 in the air, we're also causing far, far, far less from being taken out. There's a wide range of estimates. It depends on the assumptions you use and what you do, but it ranges from 20 gigatons to 60 gigatons if every single acre of farming went down the path that Gabe's on. And this is just what we're farming today, active cropland. They went down the path Gabe's gone down, we would remove anywhere from 20 to 60 gigatons, right? So at least half, and maybe even more than what we need to remove from the atmosphere. And you wouldn't do it overnight, but you would do it relatively quickly. And it's also the level of degradation of the soil on a particular farm that does it. Like really crappy soils will start to sequester carbon much, much faster, and then it kind of levels off at a certain point when it just, gets healthier, but it still continues to sequester it. So humans can be just as constructive as we are destructive. And I don't want us to beat up our species. We make some errors, right? But as we learn, we should improve, right? We made various assumptions that we could do things better, right? Science and chemistry just took off in the early part of the 1900s or late 1800s, and we went a little crazy, right? But it got us to 7.2 billion people at the same time. But like in my video about, nice short one, I talk about how it takes 10 calories of energy today to get 1 calorie of food to a human on average on this planet. That's unsustainable, right? What Gabe just exposed us to is huge energy saving costs. And so going back to ways I'm going to unpack a lot more in future videos. That's more teasers for you. But how we here in Niagara Falls, using a good green movement, changing our culture, educating ourselves, and then working through how we leverage our annual tourism, expand that market so it's not a 3-month but closer to a 12-month market, so it's not just the current estimate of 9 million tourists a year, but it's 27 million tourists a year. 27 million people that we're bringing into our community each year, and educating and exposing them to these things and sending them back to their homes to expose others, right? Right now, just to kind of educate you, and anyone who's gotten this far, thank you for watching this far. I could be, I'm not the best voice, I'm not the prettiest person, I'm not a fresh young face, and I got a gruff old voice and I talk kind of directly. So if you made it this far, thank you. You're a tough soul and you must be interested. But over here on my YouTube channel, I just put out Hawking Part 1 a day ago. It's gotten 66 views to date. What About Egrets has only gotten 41 views in the last 10 days. And a lot of these views, when I go into the analytics, I discover a lot of people aren't even watching the whole show. And it's fine. I mean, it's dry stuff. But I just get 5 people in this city to come to understand and see the potential that I see within the next couple of months. I'll have considered my effort a success. But you got to understand, behind each one of these videos, the average 40 minutes, I would say, one's an hour long, this one will probably get close to an hour, is the recording, the splicing them together, the thinking through, how am I going to do this video? I'm a one-man army, and it takes me, each hour video probably doing 10 hours, and I decreased that. My old series, I used to use a lot more graphics and think through things a lot, and I didn't like the quality of stuff that I had to present you. That's what got me down the photography path. I need to go capture better photos to share them so Niagara Falls appreciates Niagara Falls more by seeing it through my lens. And then that got me into birding, and here I am today. But there's been thousands of hours of research and study in the last few months, and that's following years of studying our own economy, our own problems, and trying to work through solutions. And I got some really great ideas. To understand these ideas, you have to understand where they're coming from. They're just going to sound crazy. So if I'm starting to sell you folks, please start sharing the video on your own Facebook pages and exposing other people to them so that we get more minds behind it. And the next phase of this project is to start to have more in-person discussions with people, maybe using the library or something, right? And then we got to start engaging our elected officials on, we got to identify policies that we already have in place, and I have identified quite a few, that are inhibiting us from going down this path. All right, and we got to think through how we replace those policies. There's reasons policies exist, right? There was some other problem in the past and they wrote this policy, right? And they weren't thinking about this at the time. That's something I was talking about in my previous series, how they wrote a really nice comprehensive plan for the city back in like 2005. They've implemented some of it, but not all of it. But what is hidden in that really good strategic plan for our city is, a vision of where the city should be in the future and very generic suggestions on how to get from where we were in 2005, when we're not that much closer today than we were in 2005 to realize that vision. But they're generic suggestions, and no one's thought through the wickets on the specifics, on what we, the residents, can do on a daily basis. We've got trash problems. That's costing a lot of money, and that's a big local issue. How we just got taxed an extra $4 million in a very impoverished population practically overnight to deal with our own trash. And then what are we doing with that trash? And how could we maybe do better things with that trash? We're always dealing with leaves. There are leaf answers that will actually be profitable to us in Niagara Falls instead of being an expense and a burden on us. Leaves can get us money. There's so many things once you start learning all that ecology has been learning about how we've been operating wrong as a species. We're thinking species, and that leads us into trouble sometimes when we think wrong. Right? What if we still thought the world was flat? Where would we be? And I think that's where we are with our land management. And land management. When Gabe talks the agricultural side, that's land management. A lot of these principles, they apply in the urban environments too. Certainly the suburban environments where we all have lawns and we have parks, and our public buildings have lawns and parks around them essentially. So help me out, please. Share this stuff. Thank you for watching, and get inspired, Niagara. Get inspired. Thank you.